Hey everybody, it's TR here, and it's Tuesday, time to update my blog. Since I'm a little new to this video chat blogging, I'm going to start by kind of giving you guys a little bit of background about who I am and how I got to where I am. So I'm working on my second retirement. I retired the first time in 2010 from an engineering company I'd been working for many years as an IT geek. I was department manager and managed a pretty large IT support department for a number of years. And then the company started wanting to grow, and through acquisition. So they needed somebody to really kind of make sure that the infrastructure was capable of supporting this growth. And ultimately that kind of morphed into my becoming part of a due diligence team. If you're not familiar, due diligence is just something a company does kind of once the deal is almost struck. In other words, they've kind of agreed on a price, provided that the terms are all in line, and we know what they're buying, and I mean, there's all that goes into it. Part of my role was I would go out and I would do the initial assessment of the company's infrastructure, if you will, from an IT perspective, and then oftentimes I would do an assessment of the assets, the physical assets, desks, chairs, all that kind of boring crap. But all that I would go into a report, then I would present that to the due diligence team, and then if the company ended up closing the deal, then I was on the post-support or the post-install, post-closing team, where we went in and we would integrate our systems to them, put them on our email and our domain servers, all that sort of technical stuff, get their files backing up appropriately, deploy our accounting system, find out what other systems we had to maintain for them that were specific or unique to them, and oftentimes there were. It was always a challenge, but it was always fun. I did that for I guess it must have been 4 or 5 years. But in 2009 I was boarding a flight back to Idaho in the Salt Lake airport, and I was called up to the gate, the departure gate, and there was a Delta Redcoat, which is like a supervisor, and then a couple of guys in suits, and some of the other people from other gates had come over and were gathered around, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Oh, and there's a guy there with a camera, and they awarded me my million-miler card for Delta for flying 1,000,000 miles with them, and I was embarrassed. But I'll tell you, that whole flight home, the 45-minute flight back to Twin Falls, I really sat and thought about, where I was. I do recall that in the 3 years before that I figured this out, but it's been many years since I recall these numbers. But I think it was the 3 years before I retired, I had over 250 nights in hotels. That was Hilton hotels. That's not all the hotels, because, if you travel extensively like that, you learn fast that you stay at the same hotel chains, you rent the same car chains, you try to fly the same airline, because you want to build up those miles and that priority, because you get a lot better stuff when you're out on the road, and that little bit of comfort really makes a difference sometimes, I can tell you that. I mean, I had traveled enough. I was double super black diamond at Hilton, and I got on the best floors, and oftentimes if you were in a big enough city, that floor would be key card access only, and they'd have like hors d'oeuvre bar every night from 4:30 to 7, and open bar, and it was pretty plush, but it's a small price to pay when you're working 12, 14-hour days. Oftentimes I didn't even get back to my hotel room before a happy hour was over. In reality, it was a lot of fun. It was a very challenging position, but come October of 2010, I was totally wore out, and so I decided I was going to retire. It was a good time, we didn't have any hot projects going. It was kind of a lull, and there was always a lull in the fall, because you get around Christmas time, and there's not a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. I mean, we would be working on things, but nothing would be firm to close near the end of the year. Occasionally it would happen, but so I retired home and was just basically going to hang out and do some projects around the house that I've been putting off for a while, catch up on some books, watch a little bit of mindless TV, and just relax and recharge. And that lasted about 3 months. I used to go down to Johnny's Country Store a couple times a week. I was down on Idaho 75 on the 420 road, 4 miles or so north of Shoshone. But it was kind of the hub of North County, and it was fun to go in there and have coffee and talk to some of the farmers and ranchers, and you always keep up on the gossip, as wild as it sometimes got. But and Lois and I became friends. We talked a lot about stuff that I don't think she could talk about with a lot of people because I think she trusted me. We talked a lot about investments, and at the time I was working, and still am today, trading a portfolio. That's why I'm able to sustain the lifestyle I can today. I was teasing her one day about her old dilapidated, wore-out video camera system and how ineffective it probably was, and she agreed with me 100%. And so we worked out a deal where we traded my labor for store credit. She bought all the parts and hardware and stuff, and so I went around and upgraded her camera system and put up some new cameras and did all that kind of stuff. And then that led to another job. A fellow that had a reclaimed lumber yard about a half a mile down the road from Johnny's was stopping into Johnny's. He had noticed the improvements that we had done and asked who'd done it, and she told him, and so she called me and said it would be okay for him to call me. And one thing led to another, and I ended up doing a camera system for him, a pretty extensive camera system actually, 16 different cameras. This was on a lumber yard that he had that was for reclaimed lumber. He had millions of dollars worth of reclaimed lumber in there, so I can understand why he wanted a camera system. Although the area we were in is pretty low crime, all in all. But his issue is he was remote a lot. He had met some gal on the internet and was hanging out in Washington a lot, but he wanted to be able to check in on his asset there in Idaho from the internet, and so I set up a system where he could get into it with his iPhone and check any camera, and it had motion detection on it. It was a really cool system. If there was motion at certain times or in certain areas anytime, it would automatically email him and let him know that there was motion, and he could log on instantly and check his camera and see, you know, what the motion was. It was a really neat system. But that led to another job in Shoshone for the bar. Cam owned the Rail. I think that's what it was. And she wanted a camera system put up in her bar. It was starting to become really common about then for a lot of places to have, you know, video monitoring systems put in. And so I did a system for her, and then I did a system for a bar out in Dietrich, and then I did a system for a bar in Gooding, and then one thing led to another, and before you knew it, I was in the damn video camera system business, video monitoring surveillance system. Well, I'm going to tell you straight up that I wasn't up for that. Climbing around in attics and in basements and hauling cable around and doing all that's a lot of hard work. That's young man's work, and I really didn't want to work that hard. And so I managed to sell my accounts to a company in Twin Falls so I could get them off my back. But that gave me a little bit more time, and I had gone to a music festival in the summer of 2011 over at the Grand Teton ski resort in Medi-Gal, and we hit it off, and so we were hanging out a bit, and we went on the jam cruise, and we got to talking and decided we wanted to do the summer music festival tour. And I thought that sounded like fun, and besides, I had been wanting to buy an RV anyway, because I wasn't going to be spending winters in Idaho anymore. I had already planned on doing the snowbird trick, which was, you know, summering up in Idaho at my house, but then closing it up for the winter and heading south for winter. So we went on Summer Music Festival, drove 8,250 miles. I think we did 8 or 9, maybe 10 music festivals through the summer. Got to see lots of country. We went to Sandusky, Ohio, and did all that kind of stuff. Cedar Point, you know, all of those big things. But boy, I'll tell you what, I couldn't wait to get him home. That was that, you know. I mean, we got back to Idaho in August. One of the kids went back to school, and I went back to Shoshone. And so I'm sitting there, and I've got this big RV, and I'm thinking, gosh, you know, I need something to do. And so I ended up getting a project out in Virginia. And so on the 12th of January in 2013, I headed south towards Las Vegas. I was going to pick up I-40 and then go east on I-40 towards Virginia. because it's winter and I didn't want to make the North Passage. There's too much snow and crap to have to deal with in an RV pulling a car. So the project in Virginia was broken up into two segments. You know, there was a springtime segment that I did, and then I was done with that about May. And then that actually worked out pretty good because I ended up getting a project in San Diego. So cross-country haul I went to San Diego, and I worked out there for 2 months. And then the Virginia project kicked back in, so I had to drive from San Diego back to Virginia and work on that project for 2 months. And then it was back to San Diego, you guessed, for another 3 months while we wrapped up the project that I was doing for the company down in San Diego. And I was going to winter in San Diego. I was kind of done. I was thinking, gosh, you know, I've got a nice place here in El Cajon. It was 10 miles to the beach. San Diego's weather is amazing. It's boring, if anything. But the company I had been doing a lot of the 1099 work for up in Denver needed a data center engineer, and I said, well, yeah, I can move to Denver and live there because I always kind of secretly wanted to live in Denver. So jacks up, and away we went to Colorado and ended up staying at Golden, Colorado, which was unfortunate because it was like 35 miles to the office. But there are not a lot of RV parks in Denver, at least that you'd want to stay in. And the ones that there were at the time, the oil boom was on, and they were all full of oil field workers. And so I ended up staying over in Golden, and it was okay. It was a really nice RV park. But that Thanksgiving, it was 23 below, and I had put a fresh 60-pound propane bottle on. And overnight, the gas regulator froze, and I got up at 5 in the morning because I'm old and that's what we do. And thought to myself, damn, it's cold. And so I finished my business and came out to check the thermostat because I thought maybe I'd turned it down too far. But it was, you know, where it should have been, but it was 24 degrees inside the coach. And I had a Brita water pitcher on the counter, and there was a 1/4 inch of ice on that Brita water pitcher. And I'm sitting there pondering, okay, what is it? Well, I worked it back, and I had changed the tank out the night before. I might have mentioned that, but and it turns out the gas regulator had frozen. So quick fix there. Scheming and pondering, okay, what do I do? You know, I got a blow comb. Maybe I go out there with my blow comb, but God, you know, it's 23 below. I'll freeze to death before I get the regulator defrosted. And thinking, I go, oh, wait a minute. I've got my heating pad. And so what I did was I took my heating pad, stuck it in a plastic garbage bag, and went out there and wrapped it around that gas regulator and plugged it in, came in here and climbed back in bed, turned the electric blanket up to 14. Sit there and shivered trying to get warm from having been outside 10 times in 23 below zero weather. About 45 or so minutes later, I'm laying there and I hear the furnace click and the igniter starting, and pretty soon it kicks off and away we go. We got heat. I do not know how, but I did not freeze one pipe. But I'll tell you what, these Newmark coaches, they're super well insulated, and I was burning a lot of propane because it was super cold. But if this would have been a lesser insulated coach, I'm sure I would have froze every pipe in the basement. I'll tell you what, that highly motivated me to find a place that I could call home. It didn't cost $150 a week in propane to keep warm. So I ended up finding a place in downtown Denver, of all places, on the corner of 17th and Glenarm, the Wall Street of the West, as they called it. If you don't know Denver, there's a large walking mall from Union Station all the way down to the state capitol. It must be at least a mile or a mile and a half. And it's just shops and restaurants and parks, and the Federal Reserve is there. There's all kinds of interesting things, and there was always something fun going on there. So I really enjoyed living in downtown Denver. But the company I was working for, initially the work was super interesting. We did some really fun, interesting work, but it ended up just being this kind of slog of small business support, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't down with it. And the truth was, is I'd warned them about this kind of work, and particularly this customer. You know, you just end up with a bad feeling about people, companies, premonition. You know, I don't know what you want to call it, but I had these guys pegged. that wasn't the only thing, but you know, that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I just said, you know what, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to retire again, and this time for good. And so that's what I did. I actually retired on May 1st of 16, so almost a year and a half ago now. And then I spent 3 months working on Rusty here, getting him road ready again. He'd been sitting in storage for 2.5 years, and I had been coming out and religiously starting him once a month and putting the jacks up and down and exercising the slides. I'd take and drive it out through the storage lot I was in. It was huge. It was on top of an old landfill. But I'd take him out and drive him around, keep the seals and stuff going, try to do some maintenance that way, run the generator, all those sorts of things. But I did a ton of work on him. I have a ton of video that I've just got to get produced one of these days. Some RV how-to on full cut and buff. I did a full cut and buff on him and scrubbed out all the scratches and everything, and he looked beautiful when I finished. I've accumulated some since then, but that's the nature of RVing. I started vlogging really just because I've been a photographer for many, many years. I have photos I've taken from back in the late 60s with that Brownie camera. Was the first camera I ever had. And so I've always been interested in photography. I never really did much with video. But I got a decent camera, picked up this Nikon D7200 and bought an aftermarket lens for it, a really high quality lens, and started using it, my main photographic camera. But also, it turns out it does pretty decent video as well, and so I've been doing a lot of this type of recordings are all done on my Nikon. I also have a Hero 4 GoPro. Most of the car footage and stuff that you see is all shot with the GoPro. I have a mount mounted to the windshield and also on the dash of Rusty here. So there you go. That takes you back a few years. In a future blog, whatever you want to call these things, I'll reminisce about some of my radio days because I have some pretty fond memories. I worked with some pretty amazing people, pulled some pretty good stunts, and it'll be fun to think back and recall some of those memories on a future blog. I did make it out to the Tucson Mountain Park, which is a pretty amazing place with it's really densely vegetated with saguaro cactus. And I tried to shoot these segments out there, but the wind was blowing so hard on Friday that it was just impossible. I just couldn't get good audio. But I had some great video, but you know, that's the breaks. Sometimes you just don't get the weather to cooperate with you. And then I was planning on going back out on Saturday, but the norovirus struck. I was at some friends for Thanksgiving, and there was a little girl there that apparently had some kind of a gut bug. Picked it up from her daycare or preschool or someplace like that, and was at the dinner we were at, and basically everybody at the dinner got it. It was about a 36-hour incubation, and then about 48 hours of. So I don't think I'm going to stay the whole winter here. I think I'm going to be moving on to probably over to Quartzsite. I mentioned in an earlier update that I was going to go over and check out Organ Pipe, and so I think what I'll do is I have plans to visit my father in Arkansas for Christmas, and then I think I'll come back here and depart right around the first part of January and head over to Organ Pipe, and then over to Quartzsite, or vice versa. I might go to Quartzsite and then come back to Organ Pipe. One of the reasons I came to this place is because it's close proximity to mountain biking. Best laid plans. My last stop in Idaho before I headed south permanently was in Pocatello, and I was visiting some friends, and we went up into the Mean Creek area of Pocatello and we're doing some hiking. And had a really good day. We probably hiked a couple miles. I don't know. I really didn't keep too close to track, but when I got home to climb up in Rusty, and the first step where I was parked at the fairgrounds was a little tall. I stepped up and went to push up, and my left knee just went away on me, and I ended up tumbling backwards off the steps and wanking my knee and ranking my back. So I've kind of been dealing with that since. I was going to spend most of October in southern Utah, but my knee was bothering me so bad that I called the physician that I was seeing when I was living in Denver and asked him if he had any recommendations for somebody in like Las Vegas or something, and he did. And so I went down and saw this guy in Las Vegas who basically, I told him my history, he did an MRI and he could see, I basically have osteoarthritis in the left knee. It's running. Knees and hips run in the family. My grandfather had both of his knees replaced, that I can recall. My grandmother had both of her hips replaced. So my mom had a bad knee. I'm probably going to just be throttled with it. They won't do. There's nothing they can do with it. It's a total replacement, and I'm just not down for that yet. I've been dealing with it. And yeah, I've tried all of the supplements and everything, and none of that worked. So in Las Vegas, I went in and they did cortisone shots in the knee. That was pretty much just to help take the swelling down on the bone on bone. And then they've given me a brace to wear that kind of holds the knee apart a little bit. And so I have another 3-4 days that I have to kind of take it easy. So that'll do it for this week. Next week I think I'll put together a little bit more of this autobiographical kind of video. Share with you some of the history that I have around my 23 years of working in radio as a DJ. I've got some pretty good stories. We pulled some pretty good stunts, and it'll be fun to reminisce about those. So I think maybe I'll do that as part 2 of the Who Is This Bearded Hippie Nomad Dude that's talking to me on YouTube right now. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to change my post dates from Tuesdays to Fridays because Tuesdays there is a mountain biking group that goes out, and I want to start joining that as soon as my knee gets there, and I think I'm about there. I'm going to try some light riding here towards the end of the week, and that's going to occupy most of my Tuesday mornings, which is what I was using to finalize and proof my updates on Tuesdays. A couple of parting thoughts. Sharon, thanks. You made me laugh about the cupboard doors because it was one of the things that was bugging me about that damn video I posted. And I think it was June Lee keeps calling me sir. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, but it's just TR. So with that, we'll wrap it for this week. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you next week. Until then, peace.